I will begin with you because you broke the story how Ukraine wanted to give America information about 2016 election interference, and they were solicited by who to give them dirt on Donald Trump and his team?
Yes, absolutely. They had two concerns. One was that Ukraine might have been trying to assist Hillary Clinton in winning the 2016 election unfairly, and two, that Joe Biden may have been involved in an effort to extort or force Ukraine to drop an investigation involving his son's company, Burisma, in Ukraine. Hunter Biden, an employee, $3 million over a couple of years working for that company. But I want to tell you something that's really important here. They released this transcript, and, of course, all the media is all excited that President Trump said exactly what President Trump already told us he said in the phone call. What isn't getting covered is what President Zelensky said to President Trump. President Zelensky, first call with the president, says he knew all about the situation involving involving Joe Biden. I'm just going to read a few words here. My next prosecutor general will be 100% my person, my candidate, and he'll be approved by the parliament, and he will start as a new prosecutor in September, and she is going to look into this situation, specifically to the company Burisma that you mentioned in this issue. The issue of the investigation of this case is actually the issue making sure that we restore honesty in our own country. The president of Ukraine was ready to open investigation because he had his own concern that this dishonored Ukraine, and he wanted to get to the bottom of it. President Trump didn't have to pressure him one bit. He was already planning to do an investigation of Joe Biden, just like we reported. And I'm going to mention one other thing. He went out of his way to tell the president. If you remember, we did a story that we broke in your show, Sean, that the ambassador to Ukraine from the United States, a woman named Marie Yovanovitch, had made disparaging comments about President Bush and President Trump, and was raising concerns in Ukraine that she was not representing the U.S. interests well. President Trump recalled her, fired her essentially, and then the media started crying, this is a terrible political thing, it was unjustified, she was doing a great job in Ukraine. Let me read to you what President Zelensky told President Trump in the call in July. I want to thank you in regard to the ambassador to the United States from Ukraine. As far as I recall her name, it was Ivanovich. It was great that you were the first one who told me she was a bad ambassador because I agree with you 100%. Her attitude towards me was far from the best as she admired the previous president. She was on his side and she would not accept me as a new president. The reason Trump got rid of that ambassador because she was causing a problem with an ally, not because it was politics. Two things that are vindicated in this transcript.
Great points and great pickups. Let's get your general perception first, Greg Jarrett.
Well, the president has every right to ask a foreign country if they have any evidence of corruption involving an American official to please investigate and please produce that evidence. Indeed, it's incumbent on the president to make that request. You know, one of the president's fundamental duties is identified in the Take Care Clause. It imposes a duty on him to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. And so if he has this information that's presented to him and it's connected to Ukraine, and he's having a conversation with the new Ukrainian president, of course it is both logical and, in my judgment, mandatory that he say, look, I want you to investigate this. Nowhere in the conversation is there a quid pro quo. Do we hear the President of the United States pressuring Zelensky? There's no evidence of that in the discussion. The transcript shows no demands, no conditions were stated or otherwise discussed.
But we now know in May of 2018 that Democrats, that would be Menendez, Leahy, and Durbin, that, in fact, they were demanding Ukraine. They wrote Ukraine to investigate Trump. So, and when they had pulled their inquiry as it relates to what was going on that they thought would help the Mueller report, they basically said without being ambiguous, the reported refusal to cooperate with the Mueller probe also sent a worrying signal to the Ukrainian people as well as the international community about your government's commitment more broadly to support justice and the rule of law. And while they described themselves as strong advocates for a robust and close relationship, then they declared, we've supported all of these things. And it appears that you're casting aside the principles to avoid the ire of President Trump. And then they demand he reverse course and halt any efforts to stop the investigation they wanted. Now, to me, Donald Trump just perfectly nailed that.
Oh, he totally nailed it. Look, there is no shortage of hypocrisy in this story by Democrats. And one other thing that's very important. On July 22nd, the Washington Post published a column, an article. They had interviewed this fired prosecutor, Victor Shokin, and he's on record as saying that he was fired because he was investigating Hunter Biden and his Ukrainian gas company, Burisma, and then Vice President Joe Biden threatened to withhold $1 billion in U.S. aid unless Shokin was sacked. Here's a quote from Shokin to the Washington Post. I will answer that the activities of Burisma, the involvement of Biden's son, Hunter Biden, and the prosecutors, investigators who were on his tail are the only, I emphasize, the only motives for organizing my resignation. So there is the real story, and the president was right in demanding that Biden be transparent now and talk to us about what appears to be rampant corruption by Joe Biden, his son, and others.
Sounds to me like there will be accountability in all of this. I'll get back to you on the crimes committed. Now, because I know John Solomon, you're working on a really big story that is going to blow this whole thing wide open if it's what I think it is. Can you give us a clue?
Let's go back to what Greg just so rightfully pointed out. I interviewed Shokin back in May, and I had a column back in May.
This is the prosecutor, right?
The prosecutor that Joe Biden got fired by saying, if you don't fire him, President of Ukraine, I'm going to withhold $1 billion of U.S. aid and you will be bankrupt. And then that prosecutor got fired. Now let's remember where we are. Shokin says he was told he was fired because he was investigating Biden. That's what he told me in May, and what I reported. He told that to ABC in June, and he told it to the Washington Post in July. So he's told it 3 times. Vice President Biden has said, I only fired the guy because I thought he was corrupt, and it had nothing to do with the investigation of my son's company, Hunter Biden and Burisma. Tomorrow, I'm going to present hundreds of pages of internal documents from Hunter Biden's legal team, from Ukraine prosecutors, and from the State Department. These documents have never seen the light of day. They sharply and dramatically call into question the veracity of Joe Biden's claims. They're going to show meetings and dates and times of the Hunter Biden team shadowing Joe Biden's efforts to get the prosecutor fired. And there's an extraordinary, explosive statement by the Burisma legal team to Ukraine prosecutors. So these are American lawyers coming in to help Burisma's case go away in Ukraine on Hunter Biden's watch. They make a jaw-dropping admission of a political dirty trick that was involved in justifying. And
you have the evidence, the emails that will prove all of this.
These are official documents approved and confirmed by the Ukrainian government, by the State Department, and by members of Hunter Biden's legal team. These are documents that come from the inside, the very people Hunter Biden and Burisma were working with to make this legal case go away. It will shock the conscience, and it will cause a lot of people to question, is Joe Biden really telling us the truth?
Sounds like the end of the road for Joe Biden. What crimes do you see here potentially, Greg Jarrett?
Well, if you're engaging in, what we would normally call extortion with a foreign country, you're talking about bribery, honest services fraud, potentially mail fraud, wire fraud, a violation of the federal gratuity statute. And, if you give me a couple hours, I'll probably come up with another half a dozen potential felonies. So
all right, I got to let it go there, but
things.
Both of you will be on hand.